Alright, hi everyone. I thought I would give you a quick tutorial on how to ID the skull that I posted online the other day. So some of you ID'd the skull so quickly and so well, but for those that weren't too sure or had not a clue at all, here's a short tutorial on how to ID cat skulls. Alright, so this is a front-facing view of the cat skull. Over here we have the eye orbital. This is where the eye would sit, and over here as well. Over here is the nasal cavity. Um, Nasal cavities are prone to collapse, essentially. So the older a skull is, the more likely it is to get knocked around a bit and be harder to identify. So here's a side view. You can see there's a bit of mold forming, discoloration, all very normal. You can see the eye orbital there. And over here, we've got the eye orbital again. And down here, we can see a few teeth poking down. Okay, now this is the rear view, which despite the fact that you can't see teeth and you can't see the eyes, it is actually a really important view to see because here is the foramen magnum. The foramen magnum is where the spinal cord exits the skull. And depending on the angle, the placement, and the size of the foramen magnum, will determine if the animal is a quadruped, so walks on all fours, or if it's a biped, like us humans walking on two legs. So this animal, according to its foramen magnum, is a quadruped. Now, if you have a skull in hand, a good way to determine that is just stick a pen up here to take the place of a spinal cord, and the head will automatically sit where it naturally would on a living animal. Okay, now here is the underside of the skull. This area here is known as the maxilla, which is the upper jawbone. The upper jawbone is fused onto the rest of the skull. Now, each part of the skull has a special name, but we don't really need to go into that for these purposes. Just know that there's different pieces, they all have their purpose, and there's only a few that we actually need to look at in order to determine what animal this is. So over here we have the tympanic bulla, or the plural form, tympanum bullae. Basically, this is just a section of the ear. The larger these are, the better an animal can hear. Over here, the foramen magnum, which we've already discussed. This animal's a quadruped. Over here, we have the eye orbit. And if we go back over here, you can see these eye orbits are really rather large. And also they're front-facing, which means this animal is probably pretty good at seeing. Front-facing also means it's a predator. Prey items such as deer, they have eyes that face mainly on the sides of their head. That's so that they can be grazing down on the ground, but they can sort of see off in the distance in their peripherals if there's a predator approaching. They don't, however, have very good depth perception. Whereas something like a cat or a dog, their eyes face mostly forwards because they need excellent depth perception in order to be able to pounce on their prey. So let's move over here to the teeth, which is the most important characteristic in identifying this particular animal. So on any skull, you normally have incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. Depending on the species and the individual, some of those might be missing. For example, kangaroos, they don't have canines. But anyway, that's another story. So the incisors and the canines are actually missing in this individual, and some of the premolars as well, but you can see the molars and premolars here. And if I can get a close-up view, I'll come back to that. You can see that these premolars and molars are extremely pointed. Now, normally, well, in a human, for example, we have ever so slightly pointed or ridged premolars and molars. That just helps us bite down, grip, chew, and grind, whereas this animal is only interested in biting and gripping. It doesn't do any grinding whatsoever with these teeth, so it doesn't eat any plant matter. You need to have grinding teeth if you're going to eat plant matter successfully. So this animal, I'm willing to bet, is a carnivore. In fact, these teeth are so unique that they're the only species in Australia to have these types of teeth. So if you flip over a skull and you see extremely pointed premolars and molars, then this is a cat. There's nothing else in Australia that it could be. If you're looking at a skull overseas, yeah, there's other things it could definitely be. But in Australia, if you see the skull out in the wild, then it's undoubtedly a cat, probably a feral cat. Okay, so if we come back here, one thing that we can do is, especially when we're measuring and looking in between individuals and comparing them, what we can do is measure the skull length and the skull width. We can measure the, as I said, the size and length of the tympanic bullae, and we can also measure the orbital width and the orbital height. Then we can compare, we can turn these into ratios or percentages and determine how much of the skull is taken up by certain sections. So how much of the skull is taken up by the brain cavity, how much is taken up by the tympanic bullae, and how much is taken up by the eyes. So the higher percentage given to a, say, eye space, that animal is more likely to be a nocturnal animal, for example. And the more area given for the ears, the better hearing it's going to have. This is also quite a large brain cavity compared to the skull length, which indicates, not necessarily, it's just an indication that this animal is probably fairly intelligent. So kangaroos, for example, they have these tiny little brains, but relatively large skulls. They're not the brightest animals. They're lovely, adorable, one of my favorite animals, but they're not about to win any Nobel prizes in physics or anything. Okay, now we've discussed these teeth, extremely pointed. Over here, I found one of my cat skulls still had a canine, and this canine is extremely elongated, so we can even measure this canine and get a length and compare it to other species and their canine lengths. And you can see that this animal is probably very good at grasping and biting down on its prey. In fact, cats, they like to come up behind their prey and bite at the back of the neck, and they'll hold on with these long canines, give the animal a shake, and hopefully that animal died quickly. But as we know, cats are prone to playing with their prey, especially when food is in abundance. Anyway, so all in all, this animal has large eye orbits. Once upon a time, it would have had a fairly decent smell, a sense of smell, sorry. The brain cavity is fairly large. It has good hearing, front-facing eyes, so we have, and those teeth, those incredible teeth, are indicative of a carnivore. So we have carnivore, predator, of course, quadruped, as by the foramen magnum, large eyes, so probably nocturnal, good sense of smell, good hearing. All in all, this, and according to the dimensions of the skull, this is definitely a cat. But as I said before, these teeth in Australia alone are enough for people to say cat skull. Anyway, I hope that was of some help, and I look forward to hearing your comments and feedback. Subscribe if you want to see more.